Random House Audio presents The Long Goodbye. This is the author, Patti Davis. When I was about 10 years old, my father and I drove out to the ranch my family owned throughout my childhood. It was a bright Saturday morning, and we turned off the Pacific Coast Highway onto the familiar mountainous road that would take us to the open land and undeveloped acres of Agoura. On the way out, we talked about his horse, Nancy D., and the foal she was about to have. It wasn't a planned pregnancy. An Appaloosa stallion who had been given to my father had broken through 2 fences to reach Nancy D., and had succeeded admirably. As soon as we drove into the barnyard of our ranch and saw Ray, who took care of the property for us, we knew something was horribly wrong. Tears streaked his face, his eyes were puffy from crying, and he stood in front of my father with his head down, unable to meet his eyes. Nancy D. had died during the night from a virus that no one could have known she had. There were no symptoms, no clues. It suddenly and quickly killed her and the colt inside her. I immediately burst into tears. Nancy D. was the first horse I ever sat on. When I was small, my father used to hold me on the saddle in front of him. When I got bigger, he would lift me onto her back and lead me around the ring. She was patient and steady, seeming to know that the small person on her back was young and inexperienced. When I looked up at my father that morning, against the deep blue of the sky, he wasn't crying. He was looking up into all that blue, and the expression on his face was sweet and soft and 1,000,000 miles away. "Why aren't you crying?" I asked him through my own tears. He put his hand on my shoulder and met my eyes. "Because," he said, "I'm thinking about all the wonderful times I had with her. We had some great years together." It was one of my first lessons about death, about looking past it, if only for a few moments, at all the life that went before, all the loveliness and the rich memories. Those are what sustain us, is the lesson my father was trying to impart. On the day he was dying, I whispered to my father, "You'll see Nancy D. again. The 2 of you will go on long rides just like you used to." I whispered it with the trust he always wanted me to have, that in the stillness of his soul he would hear me. In the days and weeks since he died, I've often found myself lingering on the image of us standing at the ranch on that bright Saturday morning, my father's eyes tilted up to the sky. His first response to death was to remember the beauty of the life that had passed. The memory comes when I find myself wondering, where are you? The larger question aside, I knew one place I would find my father was in the manuscript I had begun in April 1995, and had set aside, after a couple of 100 pages, in February 1997. I'd started writing it as a way to deal with the grief that slammed into me that spring, 6 months after my father announced to the world that he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I don't know why so many months went by before I crumbled beneath a fate none of us could control. Grief has its own timetable. Maybe there is a mercy to it, a period of shock, numbness. We drift on with the knowledge that life has shifted dramatically, but we are unable to fully grab hold of what that means. In any event, April is when it happened. I began writing a kind of journal. In sleepless nights, in the quiet hush of dawn, sometimes in the back of taxis or at outdoor cafes along Columbus Avenue. I was living in New York, and the trees in Central Park were sprouting new leaves. Blossoms were appearing everywhere. The air was warm and billowy. So much new life was around me, even my relationship with my mother was new. After many years of a chilly, dispiriting war, one that wounded my father terribly, we had come together lovingly, peacefully, and sadly, joined then in the hard journey of losing my father. It was a journey my mother would call the long goodbye. When I finally realized I was writing a book, there seemed no more appropriate title. In February 1997, I put the manuscript aside. The tumult of my grief was starting to abate. I looked ahead and saw months, maybe years, of waiting for an ending that was inevitable. Alzheimer's disease locks all the doors and exits. There is no reprieve, no escape. Time becomes the enemy, and it seemed to stretch out in front of us like miles of fallow land. If I kept adding to the book I had committed myself to, I reasoned, I would end up with a tome of 1,000 pages, and much of it would be about the long stretches of waiting for things to get worse or end, with we, the loved ones, having nothing but helplessness at our fingertips. In the lexicon of the disease, it's called plateauing. People with Alzheimer's skate along some strangely level course, not markedly different from one day to the next. It can last for many months, but it's the thinnest of ice they are skating on. The change will come, the fall, the next phase. They will get worse. if death doesn't claim them first. I moved back to Los Angeles in 1997. Closer to my parents, closer to my father's leaving. Over the next 7 years, I wrote for magazines and newspapers and occasionally wrote about what we were going through as a family. During those years, the world of our family changed in some dramatic ways. Maureen was felled for a second time by melanoma, but this time it was everywhere, racing through her body and conquering everything in its path. She was a valiant opponent, refusing to give up. She was in the John Wayne Cancer Ward at St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica when our father fell and broke his hip in February 2001 and was rushed to the same hospital. Ron flew in from Seattle. We visited Maureen on one floor and our father on the other. Maureen was too ill to go down 3 flights and see the father she adored. My father probably wouldn't have recognized her even if she had been able to. My mother would have to sleep in their bed alone. Her love, her partner for decades, would now have to sleep in a hospital bed. What was once his office would now be his bedroom. Nurses would have to tend to him, and we were told to expect his death in the next few months. None of us expected him to live for another 4 years, bedridden, with Alzheimer's as his captor. Maureen died on August 9, 2001, at home in Sacramento with her husband and daughter around her. Our family was growing smaller in so many ways. The following month, the entire world changed. September 11th destroyed more than 2 towers, more even than the thousands of lives that were lost on that terrible day. It destroyed faith and hope for the future. It killed something vital in all of us. It ripped at the fabric of life as we knew it and left us with a sense of dread that nothing could ever take away. My mother and I stood at my father's bedside and told him what had happened, even though he couldn't consciously absorb it. There was a service at the Bel Air Presbyterian Church, and my mother and I went. We sat in the same pew my parents always used to sit in. I sat on the aisle, as my father always did. He was claustrophobic. He insisted on aisle seats. I shared that affliction with him and was glad to take his seat. When the choir sang America the Beautiful, tears broke in me. I wept for every person who was suddenly and brutally faced with the loss of someone they loved, cared for, thought they'd see tomorrow. I wished I could tap into what my father would say. I knew it would soothe somehow the wide, raw wounds that were everywhere, but I couldn't. His wisdom, his ability to comfort in times of crisis, had been pirated away by a disease that doesn't care what you can offer the world. It's simply come for you because you were in its path. 10 days after my father died, I took a box of pages from my bookcase. Pages I began in April 1995 and had titled The Long Goodbye. The morning was foggy. It reminded me of my father's last day, the soft white beginning of it. Slowly over hours I read and went back in time. I returned to the daughter who was just starting to grapple with the huge loss of her father, the hole in the world that would never be filled when he left. I didn't know then to what degree Alzheimer's would be a slow prelude to dying, a blurring of everything that was uniquely, essentially my father. In 1995, not too many of us knew what to expect from the disease. We knew it was a wasteland, but what did that mean? We imagined stumbling upon oases, spots of lush green in all those acres of dying. In reading through these pages, I have found moments when both Maureen and I held to that illusion. The truth of the journey through Alzheimer's is that it doesn't happen like that. Alzheimer's is a scorched earth disease. Nothing you think will remain does. But as soon as I tell you that, I must also tell you that if you are with someone who has Alzheimer's and you pay close attention, if you open wide your heart and your mind, you will see that the disease can never cross the boundaries of the soul. For years I had gentle and true conversations with my father. Between his soul and mine, sometimes in total silence. There will be people who say that didn't happen, that it can't happen. It's just a wishful fantasy. Don't believe them. When I began this book in 1995, I had the naive idea that it was not a book about Alzheimer's, only a book about grief. I was wrong. Alzheimer's is a haunting presence in these pages, the relentless pirate, the thief that steals a human being like nothing else can. The only victory over it is in the realm of the soul. My father proved it in his last moments before dying. My father is now buried at the library. My mother will be laid to rest there as well. On the final day of a long week of mourning, we stood with miles of sky above us, rolling acres of land below, and I finally understood why my parents fell in love with that mountain top and why they wanted their legacy to be housed.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?